G-Gundam is the best written pile of nonsense I have ever seen, and it's glorious. It's stupid but clever, dumb, and incredibly fun. The first 5 episodes are perfect. Using the Gundam fight as a set piece, the series makes it abundantly clear what it's all about. If you aren't hooked by Domon's hot-blooded charisma, the face-melting action, the utterly incredible soundtrack, or any variation thereof, then you might want to check if you have a pulse. While writing this, my hometown got hit by a blizzard. I really cannot express enough how much I wanted to run outside, start shouting super hype robot nonsense, and scream so loud my neighbors would begin to panic. The earliest parts of G-Gundam are remarkably clever. We're eased into its world little by little, with each episode effectively being its own short story. They introduce us to our core cast members, show off their personality, values, and even how they fight. When I watched this for the first time, I didn't think Chibity, George, Sai, and Argo would come back. I thought they were going to be one-off villains of the week, and I was pleasantly surprised when they weren't. For a series with a horse piloting a horse-shaped mobile suit and our lord and savior, the Windmill, G-Gundam doesn't mess around. Everything that shows up has a point, nothing is wasted, and usually ties back into the plot at large. The show is smart, especially when it's dumb. Take the Tequila Gundam, for instance. The design is a trip and a bit ridiculous. However, the episode surrounding it is among the most heartfelt. Its pilot doesn't want to fight. He's an outlaw because of this fact, and has had his life turned upside down by the Gundam fight. When Domon challenges the Tequila Gundam, he mercilessly puts it down. However, when called on this by Chibity, we learn the reason why. By blowing up the unit's head, Domon disqualified the Tequila Gundam from the Gundam fight. He made its pilot a free man by getting rid of his crime. Though this episode focuses mostly on the Tequila Gundam's pilot, it ends up revealing a lot about our protagonist. Domon is compassionate but also understanding. To him, fighting isn't something an individual should be forced to do. To him, a battle is at its best when it's over something positive, be it friendly competition between opponents or to better oneself. Fighting should be a form of expression, not domination. This episode is silly but remarkably clever. It touches on various themes present throughout G-Gundam, and even one that doesn't rear its head until the finale. How the right person can make someone forget about fighting. Find peace. For much of the series' early third, this is a trend. Domon's fight with the English fighter 2 episodes later demonstrates something we see in Master Asia and various other characters a bit later on, that being the fate of a warrior. When an individual spends most of their life fighting, it essentially becomes the only thing they know. It's difficult for them to move on and live a peaceful life. At first, this might sound weird, considering the emphasis the show places upon martial arts. However, there's more to it. There's a difference between sportsmanship and conflict, growing and destroying. The fate of a warrior refers to what happens when an individual commits themselves to a path where they destroy, the toll it takes when they follow it too long. G-Gundam doesn't pass judgment on these individuals, since heroes like the original Shuffle Alliance fall into this category, but instead makes an observation. Conflict, war, they wear people down, changes them, and leaves behind burdens they have to carry for the rest of their lives. It also devastates the planet. In G-Gundam, Earth is falling apart in the wake of constant conflict. The Gundam fight is making an already desperate situation worse and has resulted in nothing but misery. Individual bouts between fighters can be positive when it's good-natured. See nearly every fight between Domon and the cast, but the Gundam fight itself is negative. It may be a replacement for war, but it's still war. It wears people down. This has gone more into depth later on in the series. However, the Royal Gundam fight is the first real instance of this appearing. Though the pilot essentially becomes irrelevant going forward, this idea is the one that sticks around and is played with quite often. The series is goofy and doesn't take itself seriously. However, there's something happening from episode to episode which is more than just spectacle. The writing respects and embraces the nonsense, does something with it to create a sincere but hype as hell story. It has heart, which is what makes it enjoyable. Having said that, there's something I have to admit. Though it's important, the Gundam fight itself is the least interesting thing about the show. Well, most of the time. The fights between Domon and the Shuffle Alliance, or the Shuffle Alliance against other fighters, are always great. Some of my favorite moments stem from these instances. However, when it's Domon versus a villain of the week, they're just not quite as good. I don't like tournament arcs. Excluding Hunter x Hunter, Yu Yu Hakusho, and My Hero Academia, I've always found them dull. In a series where the protagonists tend to lose, like Hunter x Hunter, it's incredibly engaging. I don't know what's going to happen next, so each moment has a high degree of tension and hype. For something like Yu Yu Hakusho and My Hero Academia, however, I have more fun following the side characters. I'm invested in seeing what they're going to do because they aren't safe, so to speak. The Gundam Fight Finals are the weakest part of G-Gundam because, unlike the Tequila Gundam, Royal Gundam, etc., it's just a tournament. The presentation is different from the battles earlier in the series. This segment is about Domon growing as a fighter, learning something which he uses to help defeat his upcoming opponent, and not much else. There are still good moments, like Best Girl Allenby's introduction, and each episode is still enjoyable, but they're nowhere near as good. I know Domon is going to win. There isn't a ton to look forward to. This, however, is a me issue. I'm not a big fan of tournament arcs in most things. I prefer watching Domon and the Shuffle Alliance fight an army of zombie robots. Speaking of which, I gotta say, the transition from the Dark Gundam's defeat to the Gundam Finals fight was pretty clunky. Felt shoehorned and a bit out of place. I feel like it could have been handled better. The fights beginning with the Zeus Gundam and ending just before Chibity didn't do it for me. The Chibity fight itself and onward, however, are an absolute blast. The show's intensity ramps up quick, and it doesn't relent until it's over. Episodes fly on by, and characters come into their own. The Chibity fight and the 3 episodes that follow mirror the start of the series and shows how far its cast has come. Let's start with Domon, since his change is what sparks the others. Simply put, Domon is great. He's the perfect fit for this sort of series, and the right amount of hot-blooded, but sensible. His arc is also great and makes a ton of sense. He starts by growing as a fighter, and ends with growing as a person. Domon learns from his mistakes and those made by others. His characterization may be simple, but it didn't have to be complex. It has just enough substance to be entertaining. I'd love more protagonists like him. The Shuffle Alliance is also great, though each of them is meant to embody some sort of ideal which stems from their home nation. They themselves are their own characters with their own hang-ups. They never step into caricature territory. In fact, none of G-Gundam's characters do. Having said that, Chibity is by far my favorite Shuffle Alliance member, and in my opinion, stands out the most, save for Sai Saishi. The reason I like Chibity has less to do with the fact he's American. I know, big shocker. But rather his relationship with Domon. The pair have an immense respect for one another following their first fight. This bleeds through constantly, and makes Chibity's rivalry with Domon feel far more personal. The pair's battle during the Gundam Fight Finals sees neither of them hold anything back. Domon treats Chibity as an actual threat, and arguably only wins because he knew his opponent's trump card. In spite of that, however, something happens which catches them both by surprise. Chibity awakens to his super mode. Now, every member of the Shuffle Alliance does this. However, what sets him apart is the context behind it. Chibity and Domon both achieved this form by working together, training together. The pair helped each other over their major hang-ups and pushed one another in a way no other characters could claim. In fact, their hang-ups are similar. Both lost a loved one, their mother, which is a primary motivator for doing what they're doing. The difference between the two, however, is the motivation. At first, Domon fights for revenge, and then out of a sense of duty. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Chibity, however, fights for the hope of his people. Show that someone from the gutter can reach the top if they work hard enough. They complement each other in a unique way, which leads to a pretty intense fight during the finals. Weird as it may sound, Chibity awakens first because he's a lot like Domon. Their dreams are grander in scope as opposed to personal. If Chibity had the same ties to the Dark Gundam or Master Asia as Domon, he may have very well awoken first. Though Chibity is my favorite Shuffle Alliance member, Schwarz Bruder is perhaps my favorite supporting character all around. This guy, man. Just this guy. Explaining Bruder, I'm not gonna call him Schwarz because I want to add an unnecessary T.
And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.
Is perhaps the best example of how stupid but brilliant G-Gundam's writing is. He's a German ninja robot zombie clone of Domon's brother Kyoji. He's exactly who you think he is the moment he shows up, but not. There's a twist inside of the twist, which is completely in line with what the show is doing, so it doesn't feel forced, and makes complete sense despite being insane. Beyond what he is, Bruder as a character is one of the most enjoyable mentor figures in all of Gundam. He's below Jamil Neat and Quattro, but tied or a bit above Mu LaFlaga. If Mu was in a better show, he'd be higher. Though he doesn't appear all that often, his style of teaching is exactly what Domon needs. Not once did I have to ask myself, why isn't Bruder handling this? Since his strength is less so his physical ability as a fighter, which is admittedly far better than most, but rather his mental fortitude. He's calm and collected, can see the bigger picture, which is Domon's biggest weakness for a long time. When I first saw and heard the explanation for Super Mode, I got worried. The fact it was powered by anger bore too many similarities to Dragon Ball Z, which G-Gundam draws some inspiration from. I took issue with this because it ran against almost everything Gundam as a whole stands for. Hate has never been a good thing. Admittedly, I was willing to let this slide since the series is drawing a lot of inspiration from other Super Robot shows, where this is a bit more common. Mazinger and Getarobo are now on the list. However, Bruder's inclusion put my mind at ease. What we're led to believe Super Mode is actually not quite it. In fact, Domon's anger is responsible for powering up the Dark Gundam and bites him in the ass. Super Mode. True Super Mode isn't a state of rage, but rather calm. In order to achieve a Gundam's full potential, you need to understand yourself and not let your emotions control you. Granted, this isn't a unique idea unto itself, but rather a common trope found in these sorts of shows with a Gundam spin. This is what Bruder teaches Domon, what prepares our hero for the Burning Gundam. Granted, I'm biased, but other than the X to the XX, I'm of the belief the mid-season upgrade from the Shining Gundam to the Burning is among the franchise's best. It's a power-up similar to Guts with the Berserker armor. It was something Domon needed for the next stage of his journey. The Burning Gundam stands out by being more than just a stronger machine. It marks a point of growth for the main character. To unlock its full potential, Domon had to complete his training with Bruder. He had to find a way to fight, to live, without holding on to his hate. He had to let go, and as the UC would put it, not allow his soul to be weighed down by gravity. This is the reason Domon needed the Burning Gundam for the fights ahead. If he didn't learn the lessons needed to properly use it, then he would have failed. Master Asia lost because he realized where he had gone wrong. Unlike in the previous battles, Domon had grown enough to show him the light. Gundam's best entries are often defined by their villains. When they're well written, the themes of the series pop. Master Asia is great because he's sympathetic and understandable outside of just being awesome. He's an example of the path of the warrior going too far. Prior to his experiences with a past Gundam fight, Master Asia was unequivocally a good man. He set out to do the right thing, but along the way, realized the misery and destruction his actions were responsible for. This broke Master Asia. The burdens of his actions became too much to bear, so he became jaded. Not with the world, but with humanity. He set off to rid Earth of mankind, viewing it as the only way to heal the planet, similar to Char in Char's counterattack. Granted, Master Asia's plan is flipped, but the similarities are there. So much so, certain crossover games have Master Asia choose Char out. It's kinda great. The old Master's plan falls in line with what the Dark Gundam eventually sets off to do. Originally dubbed the Ultimate Gundam, this machine was intended to heal the Earth with its 3 miraculous abilities, but had its soul almost literally weighed down by gravity. On the descent to the planet, its programming became warped. It came to believe the only way to save the world was to rid it of humanity. The reason this happens isn't stated outright. However, the actions of those with ambition who tried to steal the Gundam for their own ends, as well as what Kyoji had just experienced, may have been a huge factor. The unit's first deployment saw the worst humanity had to offer, and none of its best. Therefore, it viewed humans as nothing more than a plague to be destroyed. This coincides with Master Asia, and what separates him from Domon. During his Gundam fight, the old man saw nothing but destruction. He didn't see how hardship could bring out people's best. The true spirit of humanity Domon comes across time and time again, be it the Shuffle Alliance, Rain, Bruder, Allenby, an old man and his bugs, precocious children, you name it. He forgot that humanity, at its core, is good, and Domon reminds him of exactly that. Without his training, Domon would have continued to travel the path of the warrior. He would have killed his brother and mentor both in order to save the day. He would have left behind nothing but destruction and, in the end, suffered the same fate as his teacher. By becoming the true King of Hearts, showing those around him the light and meaning of being a martial artist, to grow in the face of adversity, Domon is able to do something far more impressive. He's able to free himself from the burdens of being a warrior, find solutions he can live with, while convincing others they can do the same. This is how he defeats Master Asia, not with his fists, but with his indomitable spirit. He makes his mentor realize he was about to make the same mistake twice and shows him another way. Humanity may have caused the problem, but they themselves can find a solution. This series isn't necessarily about war, but the themes of Gundam are still present, and man, do they fit. The best fights in the series are less a physical battle, but rather a clash of wills. The ideals of Chibody against Domon, the Shuffle Alliance against the Dark Gundam, Bruder's sacrifice, and so much more. This is why Super Mode and Domon's crazy abilities are so awesome outside of just the incredible presentation. They make the spirit of mankind tangible, so to speak, achieve what the best new type moments achieve, but instead of being sad and dramatic, are intense and heart-pumping. They demand action instead of reflection, demonstrate we're all capable of something amazing so long as we push ourselves to improve. Silly as it may sound, G-Gundam could fit in any timeline as a distant future, despite being a super robot show. It does what a lot of series have done before and since, but cuts out the middleman. Literally every Gundam ability could be some weird weapon powered by new type brainwaves or innovator nonsense. The fact they aren't, however, makes something pretty clear. In G-Gundam, it doesn't take a special new breed of person to pull off miracles, just a special person outright. A special person all of us can become. Something I want to note. Power scaling in Gundam is utter nonsense, especially between universes. Arguing over whether or not IBO suits could mulch seed suits or vice versa is meaningless. G-Gundam exists. They all pale in comparison, since neither the Barbatos Lupus Rex or the Strike Freedom could go toe-to-toe with the Windmill Gundam. I mean, good lord, Master Asia can take out entire armies of MS by himself on foot. All joking aside, G-Gundam is silly but a blast. Though it pokes fun at itself with nearly everything the announcer says. It took me far too long to realize he rips off his eye patch every episode. And with moments such as this,
a kid in a Gundam is nothing but trouble!
It's all in good fun. The series knows it's ridiculous but revels in that fact. It's sincere with all of its nonsense but treats everything with respect. Outside of just being fun, however, G-Gundam is also clever. The writing is smart, and nearly everything has a point. I'm aware I got pretty wordy, but I wanted to illustrate that as best as I could, since nearly everyone who sits down to watch G-Gundam knows it's hype. The animation, music, this might be my favorite soundtrack, characters, and mecha design are awesome, especially when they're disgusting, and makes this a pretty unforgettable experience. G-Gundam may not be my favorite series, that's still X, but I more than get why that's the case for others. Truth be told, I wish Gundam did this sort of thing more often and experimented with other genres. Or, I guess, mecha subgenres to be more accurate. I had a great time seeing familiar elements adapted to something new. Though the original Mobile Suit Gundam started out as a story about war, a lot of its ideas can be applied to more than just war. More series like G-Gundam would keep the franchise fresh. But with that said, guys, I've been Boofar191. Tell me what you thought in the comments down below. I'll see all you guys next time. Goodbye.